all new painted panels.
So the reaction that I've gotten since I've saved this, I've gotten many reactions, right? The folks, so I can start, locally, the folks who live on the block knew who my grandmother was. They know my family, and so they were really, really happy, really pleased to see that I was able to, a London, so to speak, that's my last name, a London was able to come back and reclaim the space that Pauline London once stewarded. She grew food here, right? She fed people from this very soil. And so to be able to do that in her honor means everything to me. Folks who have read the article that was published in the Philly Inquirer, just all good praise and positivity. People have donated so much in-kind gifts. I had even received seeds and volunteer work, people just wanting to come see the space, people wanting to come in, put in hours when I'm not able to. This wonderful woman ended up giving me a whole solar system, like for the bus, so that it could be used as community space. The folks from Philly Goat Project came and let me use 4 of their goats to clear out some of that land back there. So ultimately, everything has been very positive. What makes London Legacy Garden the best use of land is that the land belongs to anyone who wants to come in here and grow food that's in this area, right? So ultimately, by next spring, every single house that's on this block, if they want it, will have their own raised bed. Everything that's here so far has been done with just like my own money and money from like donations, specifically from Philadelphia City Repair Project, who I definitely need to shout out because they have been a significant resource and help and just overall like community and family to me now. I mean, on the hottest of days, they've been out here planting stuff, harvesting things, putting in, fence posts and things like that. But it's a space that anyone can come into, right? There is no membership. There's no fence here. There's no gate to keep you out, right? Whoever wants to learn how to garden, whoever wants to learn how to harvest, this is a space where they can do that without feeling othered in a neighborhood that they live in. And that has been something that I have experienced, that I know my family has experienced, and just, excuse me, overall, residents feeling othered in a space that's yours, right? How are you barred from your own community? And I strongly believe and have experienced and have witnessed that development does that. Development does that to people. They other you, right? So yeah, London Legacy Garden doesn't other people.
We need revolution. We need change. And the change is centered on land. And it's about local democracy. It's about people being able to be safe in their neighborhoods, be empowered in their neighborhoods. So on this campus, on this block, we're carrying out a great experiment. And the experiment is, can community control, can us working with each other, I'm talking about working class black folks, can we create something better than what's been here before? The Peace Park is a hub for food, it's a hub for food. You know what I'm saying? Like, we educated dozens of community residents on how to do urban farming. And a lot of these folks, they go on to work at other farms, or they go on to start food businesses, or they go on to establish even growing operations in their own homes. You know what I'm saying? So this is where the magic happened at. Everything is based on food here. We like to say, like, we give fish, but we also teach people how to fish. So like, we big on food, whether it's like our refrigerator over there or our indoor pantries, our free produce days. But we really love teaching people about like how to grow food themselves. That's the number one thing. So this is like a practice space for black folks to learn like vital skills. We come together to farm together. We come together to like this is our store in here. So in this store, we have like everything produced by co-ops. You know, we had a competition in the neighborhood where we was like, look, who can find something that grows from the land that you can make a product out of? Whoever can find that, we're going to pay for your LLC. We're going to give you 6 weeks of training of how to develop a co-op. And we're going to give you 6 months of free-spaced event. And out of that, like a dozen new black businesses was formed between 2020 and present. You know what I'm saying? And the only thing we ask people to do is work with each other. For all of those things, from food to architecture and design to economics, all of that stuff is what the Peace Park is about. Land-based democracy, you know what I'm saying? Counteracting everything that's being pit against us. We also have a program against gun violence. So we have something called the Peace Patrol, where we take volunteers, we train them about conflict resolution, and we go through the neighborhood spreading love, spreading peace, working to find out who's beefing. And then if we find out who's beefing, we'll sit them down. If we find out 60th Street is fighting 62nd Street, we will find who is, and we will be like, look, bro, what's going on? We would sit them down and we would try to get it worked out, you know? We tell folks, don't call the cops, like let's work it out ourselves. So all of that stuff, family, is why like spaces like this is vital. And we see it as part of like a larger revolutionary movement.
In an area with the lowest tree canopy and more blacktop than there is green grass growing, this space has become a safe haven where people can come and reconnect that energy. And there's something true about that, like the energy that plants and the earth can give off. It's a different energy than that of cement and blacktop. And people feel that when they walk in the gate, so they come back. They understand the experience here is more than just getting access to fresh food, but it's making genuine connections, learning something new, and having a place to just be and just breathe. And that's why this community needs urban creators. And we need our community.
We need our community.
Without our community, we are purposeless.
Yes.
Our purpose is our community and to serve. This neighborhood that we're in is 19133 zip code. It's one of the poorest in all of Philadelphia. It's also a black and brown neighborhood. We are majority minority. And if you know anything about Philadelphia, segregation exists here in different ways. We see it in the different landscapes of the communities that you live in that have been segregated historically through things over history, such as redlining. And the after effects of that are seen to this day. And we see them in our community because there's little to no access to fresh food. Most of our folks will rely on public transportation to get where they need to go, and that means making an extra effort just to get to a store that can accommodate food that's, one, culturally relevant to them, and two, that they actually are able to prepare and is fresh and within a reasonable price range, and that just doesn't exist here. So we've become a gateway, a stepping stone, so that can exist. We've surveyed our direct community and said, what do you want us to see? What do you want to see grown here so we can grow that for you? During the pandemic, we were giving out 1,500 meals a week with produce that was grown here mixed into those meals for free, just so our community members could remain stable with food, because food insecurity is a real thing. Yeah. And a lot of people talk about this idea of like a food desert, but it insinuates as though that's a naturally occurring landscape. We live in a food apartheid. You know, this has been historically, purposely left out of a food system that is only serving specific races, and it's not serving black and brown people, who are the people that we serve, our community members. And you can look around us even in the greenhouse right now. Kale and collards are two of the biggest things that we grow because that's what our community members said that they would like to see grown here. Beyond providing access to fresh food and redefining a food system that does not serve our people, we're also an educational space. We teach things for our community members to engage with the land and reclaim their power. And that's what we call land sovereignty, understanding how to grow your own food. through food and land sovereignty combined, we have the ability to empower our community members to remember who they are and what we come from. This is something our ancestors have been doing for hundreds and thousands of years before us. They were stewarding their own land. They didn't have to fight for the land because the land is a birthright that's just given and it's free. And if you tend to it, she will give back to you. And that's what we do here. And we have to remind our community members of that.
Yeah.
As somebody who's been engaged in community development and other work in Philadelphia for more than, for a quarter century really, or a little more, I do find it hard to imagine that Philadelphia will dramatically transform its approach to prioritizing commercial development and private residential development for the investment that it brings. I think Philadelphia has not really moved past the mindset of being starved for any investment that it can get. It's not especially discerning about the sorts of construction and the sorts of development that happens in the city. And I think the pressures around that remain very big, in that we remain a city that's fiscally challenged, that has the highest poverty rate among big cities in the United States, and those things aren't changing anytime soon, sadly. And so I think that people in city government are likely to continue to prioritize accepting all sorts of investment, even when it means really compromising the livability of neighborhoods for poorer residents. It's hard for me to see gentrification slowing as a matter of choice, or even being substantially tempered by really robust inclusionary housing, or larger investments in affordable housing and community stabilization of various sorts. And we do make those investments, and there are lots of wonderful nonprofits and city agencies doing good work. But on balance, we're not saying no to or even requiring anything very big of the developers and investors who are both from Philadelphia and from increasingly outside Philadelphia, and unless we get a mayor who is really dedicated in quite a big way to changing this, it's very hard for me to see a big change in the city government's approach to this. Sorry if I'm a glass half empty pessimist on this. I'm too old. Well, looking at a land bank as the main land distribution entity is a valuable tool, but it's good for certain things and much less invested in other things, right? Much more, it's almost always going to prioritize the more tax-paying and bigger dollar developments. But it's also an incredibly flawed institution because it's still tied to our city council, and particularly our district council members' powers and what we call prerogative to determine in real estate development and particularly planning and investment in their individual districts. And so you may live in a district where your council rep is very friendly towards affordable housing and towards community gardens, and is going to fight to preserve community gardens and try to force developers to invest more in affordable housing. And I may live in a district where my council rep doesn't really care about those things and is much more beholden to the real estate developers that fund their campaigns every 4 years and may just have different views of what planning and development should look like in my district. And so that's not a good way to promote affordable housing, community gardens, other public and community serving uses around the city.
The way the city distributes land here, I could use the term unfair. There's something that I think folks have been talking about for years, which has been councilmanic prerogative, right? Having land in a district where basically the council person, if you're friends with them or if you have a rapport with them, they can give you the blessing on whether or not this land can be sold to you. I feel as though it's unequal distribution, right?
Don't believe in the land bank. Land bank is another slick way that the ruling class have created to keep people from getting land. That's the whole purpose of it. The purpose of these institutions, all of these institutions is part of the architecture of anti-black oppression. They all imperialist organizations. They all are oriented towards abstracting, suppressing, and maintaining the permanent system of oppression of working class black folk. Permanent. And as an institution, it's very difficult for them to break out of that mode. So land bank, subterfuge, created to put the wool over the eyes of the activists, to make us think that we have to channel our legitimate struggles in the streets to a government agency. It's creating a fiction that they actually got power and that they actually in a position to say what to do with the land. You know, you got a bunch of land that was stolen from the indigenous people and then worked by the African slaves, enslaved Africans. Y'all all crooks. It's all stolen material, man. Who was y'all to sit down and say what's what? You know what I'm saying? So I don't believe in them. I see through them. I encourage people to bypass them if possible. Go ahead, seize the land, utilize the land.
There's the words that the city uses, like in terms of their plans and their documents, like what they say they will do. There's also the actions, what they actually do. How I would characterize their actions is hyper-political. This is a city and a town that still has a structure of government that puts a lot of power into individual city council, like district-based city councilors' hands. The layers of responsibility and where the buck stops, like is it city council, is it PHDC, is it PRA, the redevelopment authority under PHDC, is it PLB, the Philly Land Bank under PRA and PHDC? That's 4 levels of boards or 4 levels of rules and code. So from my experience at this garden and having worked with other ones in the past, it's just hyper political. It kind of depends on who you know. It kind of depends on the mood of your particular district council person, whether they're pro garden or farm or not. And that doesn't make for anything remotely fair. You know, we're a large-ish operation here compared to other gardens, but what about, 2 parcels that are growing sunflowers and there's kids playing on their street? Like, what hope do they have? 4 levels of bureaucracy, up and down. So words don't match actions with the land bank and its policies. And we can all see the actions happening. This is why we're organizing and banding together now, because those words don't make sense.
I have a seat for PHA and I have a seat for the land bank, but it's at our table though. Like, we have our own table. And at that table, it's seats for them. That's so much better than them because ain't no seats for us at their table. You know what I'm saying? So working with these institutions, beloved, have just reinforced like my awareness of how these institutions are part and parcel of the system and how they represent attempts to slow things down, to misdirect revolutionary struggles. But we will engage with them.
When the city's land market changed in the 1990s, and especially in the 21st century, as a tremendous amount of speculation and investment, and also city assemblage of larger parcels of land, often with the destruction of gardens in the 21st century, some of which became vacant land management that the Horticultural Society and others do, really waiting for and preparing land for what people think of as higher and better uses, meaning tax-generating uses and uses where people are going to make money, right? So building apartments, building townhomes, building commercial space that the city can tax, even if the city gives 10-year tax abatements and has given a lot of them, right, to that sort of development. There's still the promise and the ultimate taxes, right, being paid, especially after the 10 years, right. We built not just set of support systems that are centrally focused on transforming vacant land and people taking care of it, but also a real mindset that community gardening and urban farming is about taking over vacant land. And when the city's land market made that huge shift in the late 1990s, early 2000s, to a place where people with money saw opportunity in what we call vacant lots. What you see as a vacant lot may not be what I see there, right? I may see people using a space that may be hard to discern the sort of activity on at any given moment that the city inspector passes by. So what we call vacant land may not be vacant to some people, right? That's another issue. And at a certain point, at least, I'm not sure if this is exactly the case now, but until a few years ago, almost every community garden in Philadelphia that wasn't on parkland was listed as vacant land on the city's databases. Right? And so we've seen community gardens simply as vacant land that once our land market became active, right, and land became valuable again to people, community gardening became viewed increasingly as an interim use. And I'd say, with some real regret, that urban agriculture support systems, especially the Horticultural Society, had a lot to do with helping to change that mindset and really to feed the idea and nurture the idea that community gardening, urban farming are appropriate and valuable interim land uses in preparing land, making it more attractive, beautifying neighborhoods, making people feel safer around any given block, all for attracting investment. And while the Horticultural Society also supports gardens and has promoted the preservation of some of them and supports gardeners in wonderful ways, it and the agencies it's worked for, the Redevelopment Authority, now the Land Bank, really have priorities that are very different, that center around promoting taxable real estate development. And with a very secondary role, and this is the secondary role both of the Land Bank and the Redevelopment Authority, of promoting the development of affordable housing. When cities create semi-autonomous, largely privately run quasi-public agencies, like the Philadelphia Housing Development Corp, they're creating very powerful institutions that have a lot of latitude written into their charters, right, and a fair bit of independence. They're able to, in many ways, not have to answer to the public in as broad a way, right? And yet they, with our land bank, they still have to run decisions on individual properties through the district council person's office. Cities, for a good century, have created these sort of semi-autonomous authorities so that they can work for certain interests, particularly for economic and urban redevelopment. This is where the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, our Industrial Redevelopment Authority, comes out of, and is a very powerful sort of mover in real estate development, in recent years largely focused on the Navy Yard. And cities created these sorts of entities because they wanted to build powerful institutions to really reshape large portions of the city. In the case of industrial redevelopment authorities, it's largely older factory sites and older infrastructure sites that they have power over. But it's a way to create powers that don't answer more broadly, right, to the populace, right, and our representatives.
There's just an imagination gap, right? So many things can be used for this land other than putting up an apartment complex. We could be leading in like hydroponics in the city based on how many parcels of land that we have, right? We could be putting mini parks up. I know you're not facing that direction, but just in front of me, there's about maybe 7 houses that used to be here, and it's all blank space that could be used to grow. And so I think that the way land is distributed here is careless. I believe, again, that there's an imagination gap. I believe that if the city cares about industry, right, if they care about its residents and they care about industry, that there's so many creative things that could be done with land. And for some reason, whether it be money, they keep missing the mark. They keep missing the mark. I would love to see, I just would love to see more creativity when it came to what we decide to do with land other than put up an apartment or put up, you know, a commercial space.
I noticed that Mr. Rodriguez's executive report at the top of this meeting had wonderful things to say about affordable housing starts, RFPs completed, nothing to say about gardens and open spaces.
That's right.
Except for what we saw today on the agenda. I'd like to know how the land bank is doing in terms of its strategic plan goals for open spaces and gardens, and perhaps if this, as we are all saying, if this 30-year mortgage is a true barrier and impediment. I feel that this as a tool to prevent flipping is frankly kind of a tired excuse. There are other nominal disposition means at the land banks in the land bank's toolbox, and the fact that, you know, quote, the value of our gardens and open space goes up while the mortgage goes down. That I feel is false. If we're attaching
Look at his little
perpetual open space like deed restrictions on this land, no, the value of the land doesn't go up.
For what it was, I thought the meeting today went as well as it could. From what I understand from Garden Partners and my kind of experience in this, the 30-year mortgage, the land bank's practice is, they keep saying the same, like, very simple party line about it. We don't want gardens to flip. We're scared of, like, you know, open spaces turning over to developers, blah, 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 blah. And that actually was discussed a little bit towards the end of the meeting, which was useful, because that line of reasoning, like, the land bank offers no evidence for it, really, at least in recent memory, and it keeps being like the reason that they put for this, like, very onerous policy that affects us all. So the meeting went well to kind of expose that, and get the land bank to agree and set up like a special meeting agenda item for all the gardens to like really dig into this 30-year mortgage issue. The land bank has other means of getting land into the hands of gardens for low prices for the gardeners, respecting their work, but also without those terms and liabilities and stuff that they'd be on the hook for. And they've done it in the past. Like this practice is like 2 or 3 years old at this point, and nothing's moving. like land isn't getting into the hand of the garden, so something's up, and we got to expose like what's happening.
So in post-industrial revolution, at one time this had been a paper factory and a coal mill. So the train that runs on the back retaining wall of the farm used to drop off the goods to manufacture paper and also drop off coal. So this was just left as blighted land post-industrial revolution. And after that, it became a trash dump that wildflowers started growing on some areas of, and eventually a group of like 10 to 12 people banded together, and those are who we consider the founders of this space, and they took the trash away and started growing, bringing in soil and growing, and since then, that was 11 years ago now, and today we have a full functioning urban farm on about an acre of land we're growing on, 3 acres of land we're stewarding. So this has been now a 10-year process of this land being stewarded, but probably a 5-year process of seeking ownership about.
Yeah, the land bank tends to very much approach things from their subjective point of view. And there isn't any, from what I've seen, there is no.
Yeah, and there's definitely no support at
attempt to support her, yeah. Right.
Yeah, there's no support. There's never been support given. Unless you educate yourself, even in the language that's used in a lot of their styles of communication, it's designed so that the average person isn't able to understand. And that just deters and intimidates. It deters people from wanting to be involved in the process, and it intimidates people in the process in general. And it takes really coming together, which is what we're doing now with other spaces that are under threat, so we can have that sense of solidarity with one another. Because although the land bank may have had good intentions when it was formed, it's becoming a very divisive tool. And that's frightening for people who don't have the time or energy to fight that fight when you're just trying to grow food and serve your community. And no one has ever come out to actually see what we're doing. So I think what's changed is that we're in a state of understanding that we need to approach the same energy that's being dealt with us with that energy. And that is no longer being quiet, no longer sitting and waiting for this to be delivered to us. It will never be delivered to us the way that we want it to be. Therefore, we have to use our voices, and we have to use our strength in numbers, the power of people, to be able to band together in solidarity and say, this isn't right. These 30-year self-amortizing mortgages actually don't serve us. And there's specific people that have been put in specific positions who are being used as puppets themselves in the land bank. And we're very much well aware of that. And I think for a while, those people may have been a little intimidating because they held far too much power. And we're no longer intimidated by that.
We didn't want to speak up because our application was pending. What if we made someone, a single person, wrong? And then 2 or 3 people said, well, no to them. Because somehow that's how this system of land disposition and like community betterment, which, by the way, we're on the same team. Urban Creators and the Philly Land Bank and the City of Philadelphia are in theory on the same team. Let's provide for our neighborhood. Let's get, youth education, farming, good quality, healthy food. Let's improve this place. We are on the same team, but yet, if 1 or 2 people can say nope to them, how is that a public sector? How is that a government that we can work with and believe in? So what's changed is there's more people aware. They've finally partitioned all this bureaucratic speak so we actually understand what's going on. I have a master's degree in urban planning. I've worked for a redevelopment agency before in New Jersey, so I understand like some of their side of this stuff. You know, dealing with surplus public land is tough, but they make such barriers to entry of even understanding. Then they're not communicating. Then it's like a city council or who's on the board or who you know. Like, how many layers can you like fight for when you're trying to like garden or provide for your neighborhood? It's really disheartening. So what's changed now is like we are no longer disheartened. We see our neighbors, our sister gardens like in the struggle, and we are talking, and we're not settling for tired old excuses of, you know, from the land bank, and we're not settling for non-communication as some kind of like answer or assuredness. No.
I have been involved in some of the activities around here, around land access. We've had a community garden that has been in my family since my grandmother, since my mother was a child. So my grandmother grew food that fed all of us. And they took it. You know, we all grew food and that fed my children. So now here we are in another situation with property that has been in my family that is being taken. So that generational wealth is being stolen from us. This is not about empowerment. This is not about building up a community, because how do you build up a community when you erase the history, right? We have a right. We are American citizens. We were born here. We were raised here. This is our community and this is our history. So for them to take it, it is insidious to me. That is the only way I can describe it, is to take and rob my parents, myself, my children, my children's children now do not have access to what they have a right to. So something needs to be done. You know, and this has been a long history of Philadelphia. If we look at communities of color, whether it's Black folks, whether it's Asian folks, they are coming into our communities and just taking over. I mean, they're doing it now. The Temple, okay? We had the stadium stompers that were trying to stop them from building a stadium in that community. We've had communities, I mean, South Street, look at South Street. Once upon a time, there was a vibrant Black community, but it is not that anymore. They are in Chinatown trying to take that community. They have to stop. It has to stop. And we got to get together. I'm glad to see all of you. Thank you so much for coming out, because this is where it starts. We have to take a stand.
We have to know the history of these areas, right? And talking about displacement, over here used to be real huge high-rise projects, right? If y'all not familiar with this area. This one building is a senior building. The other ones were like almost 2 times the size of that building, right? So, and it was what, 3 or 4 of those? They demolished that to build these little townhouses y'all see. You think every single family in there is living in one of these little houses? Where they go? They give those people vouchers and they send them to places like Harrisburg, somewhere they ain't never been. They send them to Pittsburgh. It's people that have moved out of here, and because they're on a voucher, they will tell them they have housing in places like Ohio, again, somewhere they have never been. Can you imagine growing up in a neighborhood your whole life? You got generations in this neighborhood, and then all of a sudden now you've become an adult, you're receiving these benefits, and they tell you gotta leave the house that your family has known all this time.
So originally we started off around the corner at 24th and Bolton. And we started on February 26, 2012. And usually things with us, like in my own experience, things always start off with, yo, meet me here. You know, that's always how things start off. So that's how the Peace Park started off. Like, meet me Sunday, meet me at the joint. We're gonna go and get on that land, right? It was right across the street from the projects. We went out there the first day, we cleaned up. We seen our power, the power of people coming together on land. And ever since then, man, we was just rocking, and we had like a really good run at that first Peace Park. We was like unmolested. And how we looked at it, we was like, well, nobody really cared. You know, you're in the middle of the hood, a neighborhood nobody care about, people that nobody care about, and then you got a motley crew of hood folks, of like white hippies, revolutionaries, black nationalists, all type of stuff, old people, young people, people of every shape and color. And we hit the land. And I think like people have maybe different ideas, but as far as us New Africans, man, we was thinking of community building, we was thinking of never giving the land back, we was thinking of using the land as a base area, we was thinking about building new revolutionary institutions such as urban farms, schools, health projects, marketplaces, mutual aid, self-defense groups. Like that's the stuff we were thinking. We develop a constitution. We develop a community constitution that governs our territory, you know, that provides for collective ownership, it provides for collective work, it provides for free health care, for free food, for free education, the right to dignified work, et cetera, et cetera. That was 3.5 years. Eventually, we clashed, we met up with the state. We both, things got a bit crowded for both of us. Here they come, here we are. And we had to fight a battle for some time, a protracted battle that sometimes is intense and very like, very forward, very, you know, openly hostile. And at other times is a bit more political and a bit more behind the scenes and a bit more cordial, but yet and still is always a battle. So the PHA, which is the largest landowner here in Philadelphia, at a certain point, they said that they needed the land that the Peace Park was on. They needed the land to start their redevelopment process, you know. And we know we wasn't going to have that, so we had to fight, we had to battle. Eventually, we did what's called like a land swap, where we swapped the old land where we were at, moved here to the new land. When we got here to the new land, we continued to rock and roll with them. And it's been a tremendous struggle to implement our program here, to implement our program of agriculture, urban agriculture for the community, food distribution, building schools, independent revolutionary schools, building marketplaces, redeveloping houses such as this one, which is a house that we received, how we say it, beating back police raids, because we've been raided by the police twice. Most recently was in June of 2020, and that was the biggest one, but that also was the biggest defeat that they faced. And defeating that police raid bought us these houses. This is how we got the legal control over the houses, by having to expel a police raid. That's the big picture of what happened. You have a clash between two different systems. One system is a system that's rooted in resistance, is rooted in democracy, is rooted in a vision of a new society. The other system is an imperialist system based on abstraction, based on violent suppression, based on wanting to defend and empower the few against the many. And those two systems is rocking, and they continue to fight. We think we are winning though in this battle, and we are committed to the long-term struggle, you know what I'm saying, to see the total victory of it, you know what I'm saying. We establish ourselves by fact first. So regardless of any legal agreements, regardless of that we got backing, regardless of how they feel about us, we got the land. We got the land, we got our programs, we holding it down. Now if you don't want to give us legal recognition for it, that's fine. That's on you. We got it. But then we go ahead and we form the land trust. Then we go ahead and we do the negotiations. You know what I'm saying? We don't trust them to sit down with them until we have some power for ourselves. So number one thing is that communities have to get power for themselves. Power is never given to you. You get power through kicking up dust. You get power through organizing your neighborhood. You get power through direct action. Do direct action first. Build up your community first. Build up your organization first. Build up your vision first. Then talk to them. The Peace Park is all about moving first. We ask permission later, man. You know what I'm saying? Because why would we ask permission to people who don't got the power to give you what you want? I'm not going to ask them for something that they don't have the authority to do. They don't have the authority to say where we can go and what we can do. That's we have the right to do that. We have the duty to do that.
You know, community gardening and other forms of urban agriculture are really well demonstrated to have very positive effects on people's mental health, on people's social ties of all sorts, whether we're talking about poor people who are trying to cope with gentrification and rising costs in their neighborhoods, or newcomers, right, from other places, immigrants and refugees who are trying to both preserve and reproduce cultures and integrate into new homes, meet new neighbors. Community gardens are among the greatest spaces and institutions, if you will, for fostering all sorts of sociability, right? I see it as one of the higher and better uses of urban land for its ability, for community gardening's ability to enable people, all sorts of people, to cultivate their own food, but do much more, to take care of land, right, and to get together and create real webs of social support. I think a lot of us use the term mutual aid, but not just in material sense, a lot of social support and cultural reproduction that people are able to express through gardening and shaping their own spaces. And it's one of the relatively few sorts of activities in which I think we can legitimately say there is genuine community-controlled development.
I wish that these systems existed differently. I wish that the fight for land that's being stewarded in such a sacred way didn't have to exist. I wish that we had systems in place that could just honor spaces like ours as so special and crucial and pivotal in our communities that they should be protected at all means possible.
I agree with that.
That's my wish, yeah.
The
thing I would like to see is that you take a percentage of these 40,000 lots, right? It can be half, 50%, and put them into a community land trust so that they are off of the speculative market forever. They shouldn't even be for sale. There shouldn't even be a threat that a garden could actually go up for share or sale. That should never even be a thing. The ones that are already being stewarded, the land that already has food growing out of it, should never even be considered for a share of sale.
Not only do we have to lead and create solutions for our neighborhoods, we also going to have to lead and create the way for the institutions within society. And the choice that we give the institutions in society is either change or be dismantled. It's your choice, you know what I'm saying? But us deviating from our course, that's just never an option. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, and this is why it's always beef. So it's still beef. It's still beef there. We believe in strengthening the autonomous authority of communities outside of the rules and regulations of an anti-black, permanent black oppression, imperialist state. You know what I'm saying? It's as simple as that. You know what I'm saying? So, seize the time, seize the land, free the land, do your thing. You know what I'm saying? Build a new world.
When we think about like the powers that be that are making these decisions on spaces that they haven't even stepped foot on, there's a level of detachment and separation from someone sitting behind a computer and a desk making decisions that impact people who are putting their blood, sweat, and tears into spaces they don't have to. We're not paid $1 million to do what we do. These people, their salaries are much higher than ours as co-directors, but we're doing this because it comes from our heart and our soul. And everyone walking this way beside us is doing it for the same reasons.
Yeah.
And I want to live in a more just and equitable society where that matters, where your sweat equity is taken as valuable, where the intentions, your morals, and your ethics behind the way you steward land, the practices that you preach, the way that you engage blighted areas that have been left for nothing and transform them into miraculous green spaces so that people can have a separation between the chaos that's out there and the beauty that's in here at the farm. I want that to be honored as necessary in this world.
Right.
But that's an upheaval of an entire system that's, again, just designed not to serve us. So that's how I do it differently.
You wear, who destroy the earth, poison the water and air. Black sharecroppers, but ain't never get our share. We fighting an enemy that don't fight fair. Our American dream has been a nightmare.